Hello, it's me, and you see in front of you a collection of a certain type of a series that GR Cubed was kind enough to help me finish. This is pretty much what I have with the iCube series. I actually have a couple more. I've got this iCube Extreme here that I'm going to kind of set to the side for now. But it's a really interesting addition to the collection, and we'll first talk about definitions. I'm going to ask a question though first, something to kind of ponder. What you see is 2x3x3 floppy iCube, 3x4x4 floppy iCube, 4x5x5 floppy iCube, 5x6x6, and a 6x7x7. So here's the initial question that I'm just going to ask right off the bat. Which of these puzzles do you think is the most difficult to solve, and why? So bear that question in mind while we kind of go through some of the theory behind what an iCube really means. Well, there's two types of iCubes. Well, there's, I guess, more than two types, but two basic types that you're going to see. There is the straight iCube, which are these guys. This is Calvin's 3x5x5 iCube. It's actually a 3x4x4 as you look at it. That comes off center like this. And then you've got Crazy Bad Cuber Dan Fast's inspired 4x6x6, or I guess you can call it just a 4x5x5 iCube, which scrambles like this. The way these iCubes are made is you take a base puzzle, in this case a 3x3, and in this case a 4x4. Now, truth be told, this was actually modded from a 4x6x6, but the way that I look at a 4x6x6 is a 4x6x6 is really a 4x4 with extensions on the top and on the bottom. So by slicing that down, it's really the same kind of a concept. To get an iCube, you take a base cube, add an extension to it, and you have an iCube. So instead of just turning like this with a 4x4, it turns up like so. So that's what an iCube is. A floppy iCube is a little different. If an iCube is taking a base cube and adding an extension to it, if you take your base cube and cut it down, then what you have is a floppy iCube. So an iCube is made by extension, and a floppy iCube is made by a cut down. So an example of that is if I took this 4x4, cut down a layer, I'd end up with a 3 down, so a 3x4x4. I'd end up with this guy. I guess I should hold it up like this. So this is really a 4x4 where the top layer was cut down and glued to this layer over here, giving you this formation and causing it to come up like that. So cut down a base cube and you have a floppy iCube. Extend the base cube and you have just a straight iCube. Again, even though this was actually cut down from a 4x6x6, it was a cut down from something that I would consider an extension anyway, which is what a 4x6x6 is. So the solve of this puzzle, and I have tutorials on both of these, is you basically solve it for the baseline cube, the baseline puzzle, and then you coordinate the extended layer, basically which is this. You coordinate this layer with this by make sure that you're pairing the corner swaps and the edge swaps. Same thing with this. It's just a more complicated version of it. So a very fun extra challenge when it comes to that aspect. So iCubes, which are made by extension, and floppy iCubes, which are made by cut down, basically. Then you've got the iCube Extreme over here, floppy iCube Extreme, which is really more like a camouflage cube. Actually, this is a 7x7, a 7x7 camouflage cube, which is solved by the particular strategy that I showed with this. But I have a tutorial on this one as well. So when wheeling this out, I asked the original question, which do we think is the most difficult? And that has to do with the kind of bandaging that happens. What all cuboids have to offer is a degree of bandaging that makes you a little more restricted in how you can conduct the solve. So the question is, what's the best strategy to navigate through all of these puzzles? Well, from my standpoint, the best strategy to use for any puzzle series is something that can be applied to every part of the series, no matter how big the puzzle gets, whether it's the 2x3x3 or the 6x7x7. So the way that we got this one is we took a 3x3. So if you take a 3x3, put an extension on it, then you've got yourself an iCube, 3x4x4 iCube. This was literally cut down to make this. So this is a 2x3x3 iCube over here. So this came from a 3x3, this came from a 4x4, 5x5, 6x6, and 7x7. Now bear that in mind. We've gone from 3 to 7, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So understand that usually when we have a base cube, such as this came from a 4x4, we'll say, when you scramble it, you basically scramble it into a 4x4. You're not really bandaging that. So you solve for the baseline puzzle. You solve for the baseline cube. If I started off with a 4x4 at the baseline for an iCube, when I scramble it, I solve it as a 4x4. To give you an example of what I mean, let's say I decide to scramble this guy. So I'm just going to do cross over here, and I'm just going to do a quick and dirty scramble. I'm really not trying to be particularly clever about this. I'm just going to scramble it up, just to kind of prove a point. As I'm scrambling it up, I'm bandaging it, so certain layers I can't get to. However, the base cube is intact. The base 4x4 is intact. All I'm doing is I appear to have a 4x4 with pieces that are literally just glued onto it. These glued onto pieces, once you put it into its native shape, will become an extra layer that can turn freely. But until then, it's now glued onto these pieces over here. Now, I didn't go through the full and proper scramble of it, because this is just to show that no matter how I scramble this, I still have a 4x4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a 4x4. If I were to do the same thing to the 3x3 iCube, I can do a little bit of a scramble here. Turn, turn. You'll notice that the only thing I'm bandaging is I'm taking out a layer that I can use. It becomes like a glued on layer. And again, I didn't do the real full scramble of this. This is just to prove a point that with an iCube, at its baseline, I really have the base puzzle. So to solve these, I would basically solve it for the base puzzle, solve it as a 3x3, ignoring these extensions, solve this as a 4x4, ignoring these extensions, then take that last layer that can now move freely and correlate it with the layer just below it by doing edge swaps and corner swaps. So my whole point with that is that you still have retained the structure of the base cube. Well, when you cut down a puzzle, you don't have that kind of form anymore. You actually cause bandaging of your base puzzle. And that bandaging of your base puzzle will turn the solve strategy different. For instance, if I take a look at, say, the 4x4, this started off as a 4x4, now it's become a 3x4x4 floppy iCube. If this were the same concept, then scrambling the base puzzle should still give me a 4x4. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do a good scramble of this. To do a good iCube scramble, as you look at this, you see that this layer is an extension of this one. As you come up to here, there's no movement with this, but it's basically glued onto this layer over here. So I want to move this layer out separate from this layer down over here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do a corner swap, 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R, turn the puzzle here, 2R, UI, 2R, U, 2R. Now why did I do that? Well, I did that so that I can try to separate these layers out. These two corners are in over here, these two corners are in over here. Now I want to take it out of sync. Put these two corners in front of me, these to the left. That will put all these corners back in, but not so here. 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R, turn the puzzle, 2R, UI, 2R, U, 2R. So as you can see, this is back in, and now this is out of sync. But we're not quite done, because now what I want to do is take these out of sync as well. So I'm going to treat these as corners too. 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R, turn the puzzle, 2R, UI, 2R, U, 2R. Okay, so in so doing, I'm going to have two that are in over here, one set that's in on each side. And what I want to do is I want to do the same thing. Put this in front of me, this to the side, that'll bring all these back, but this will still be out. Now I got to be careful because I'm about to solve this too, and I don't really want to do that. So why don't I do this? Why don't I take this center and move it over here? 2RU, 2RU, 2R, 2U, 2R, 2U, 2RU, 2RUI, 2R. So in so doing, this remains in the front, this remains in the front, this is at the side, and this is at the side. So I'm still going to mess this layer up compared with this. So I'm going to do another corner swap, but now this whole thing is my corner. This set over here. 2RU, 2R, UI, 2R, turn the puzzle, 2R, UI, 2R, U, 2R. turn it back. So what we have is we have a nice out of sync situation with this in front of me, and actually this this kind of got messed up over here. So after I have done that, then I can continue with a more completed solve. I'll just start to move these like so. Turn like this. And I'm doing it this way first so that I can move the bandaged areas first. Like so. Actually, I can turn it like this. Turn, turn. So I'm keeping the layers as freed up as possible. And now when I think I've had a pretty good scramble with that, then I start doing my 90-degree scramble. So this is shape shifting in all directions, where the width is greater than the height. The width being greater than the height gives it that floppy cube characteristic. Okay, so what do you think? Pretty good scramble? Now I see that these are associated with each other, and I don't really want that to happen. So what I can do is try to separate these guys here. There, so I've separated these two. Now I have to somehow separate these guys here. We'll separate this. D-I-R-D. Okay, now I can do this, and I've got to separate these guys. Move it here. So oftentimes with some of these puzzles, especially with these custom-made puzzles, the good scrambling is about as rigorous as the actual solving experience. And that's what I'm doing. So I'm really scrambling this thing up pretty well. Okay, so this is pretty well taken out of sorts. Okay, now taking a look at what I did with the scramble. Although this is the same kind of thing as I did with this puzzle, which is scrambling the base puzzle, which is a 4x4. By taking a normal iCube, I still have my basic 4 layers on all sides. So that's not too difficult to think how to solve that. However, when you have the iCube, you don't. Instead of having 4 layers available to me because of the extreme amount of bandaging, I just have 2 layers. I basically bandage this down to a 2x2. Just this layer moves and this layer moves. Now over here, every so often I may have more than 2 layers. This moves, and this moves. So for the moment, this guy's not bandaged. But if I just start making turns like this, then I'll find that it is. So consistently, I have really just a 2x2. So with the Floppy iCube, I've really bandaged my puzzle down to the next order lower with that. So I bandage this down to a 2-layer. So by that token, what I can do is start scrambling these other puzzles and find the same thing. The 4x4 bandages down to, really, a 2x2. What about the, what about this guy? What about the 5x5? Well, I can do the same process where I put these, where I take these guys out to our U, actually, we'll do it with the bandage layers here. Now I've got more centers and edges to deal with. To our U, to our UI, to our UID, to R, UI, to R, U, to R. Move it back. So I'm really going to scramble these with the same type of situation. Move this in. Actually move this over here. To R, UI, to R, U, to R. Move this back so this is taken out of sorts. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just taking these edges out. Now I want to destroy these corners here. To our U, to our UI, to our UID, to our UI, to our U, to R. Okay, so that's a pretty good offsetting of this. Now I'm going to go ahead and scramble everything pretty much the same way that I did last time. So the way the scramble goes is I don't have everything completely bandaged on all sides yet. By doing it in this direction. Let's say I want to move this over here. I can move this like so. Okay, so now that I've done that, if we think we have a pretty good scramble here, say I want to separate this guy. I'm looking to maybe get this one out of the way. There we go. I can move that like so. Then I can move that out of the way. Okay, so I'm doing pretty well with that. So this is the 5-layer version. Now what did I bandage this down to? What I bandaged this down to is, can you guess it? Well, this doesn't move here, so 1, 2, 3. So basically I've got a center area here, then I've got an R move and an L move. So I've now bandaged this really to a 3x3. So my 5-layer version, which my base puzzle was a 5x5, has now been bandaged down to a 3x3. So 3x3. So you can predict what's going to happen here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is a 5x6x6. What is this going to get bandaged to? Well, the process of scrambling this still is pretty complicated. 2R, actually I keep doing that. Here, 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R, RI, D, 2R, UI, 2R, U, 2R. Move this back. And now we're going to do the same technique as before. Move this in. 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R. I'm moving all the perspective corners out of whack. 2R, move this in. Now I have one more corner to deal with, which would be this. 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R, turn, turn, 2R, U, 2R. Okay, now I can start doing centers. 2R to U, 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R. This just kind of gets a feel for what I'm doing to scramble this. Okay, so you can see this is pretty well scrambled here. Now we can do the same thing here, take this out here, maybe put this out along in here, mess this up, and I still have this last layer that's available to me. And I can move this in any one of directions, any number of directions rather. Turn this here. And I can even exert a little bit of control over just how much I can move these guys. Let's say I want to move this out of line. I should be able to do it from here. I appear to be bandaged with this guy. Let's move this out. It might be a little hard to keep track of exactly what I'm doing. But in any case, I think we can start moving them all out here. Now you can guess what I'm bandaging this into, right? This is started off as a 6x6. And I seem to be bandaging them to the next lower order on the even scale. This is not going to be bandaged to a 5x5. The next lower order on the even scale of a 6x6 would be a 4x4. So have I bandaged this down to a 4x4? 1, 2, 3, and 4. And like I say, every so often I might be able to move another layer, but not usually. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this got bandaged to a 2x2, 3x3, 4x4, and now we've got this big guy over here, which is the 7x7, and I've got all these that I have to deal with. 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R, UI, D, 2R, UI, 2R, U, 2R. Move it back. We're going to do the same thing now. 2R, U, 2R, UI, 2R, 2R, UI, 2R, U, 2R. And he did a really good job in designing these puzzles. 2R, U. I'm just moving centers now. 2R, Okay, now I'm going to move these corners to R, U, to R, UI, to R, turn, turn, to R, UI, to R, U, to R. Wow, look at that. So this is a pretty mixed up side over here. And now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and do the same technique. Move this up, double turn it, move this up, double turn this, move all of these, double turn, basically taking all of these edges out of alignment. Oop, don't want to be too overzealous with that. There we go. No, that's not going to do it. And I'm looking to see if we can move this top layer. And aha, I can. I'm just trying to move these away from each other. Okay, when I think that I've had enough of moving those away, I think I can do maybe a little bit more. So I've seen GR refine his techniques more and more. And he's really done a great job with these type of puzzles. Okay, so now we can start to do our full, unadulterated, caution to the wind kind of a scramble. Like I say, scrambling it is as much of an art, it seems, as solving it. But now that we have it scrambled pretty well, what did I bandage this into? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've taken my 7x7 and I bandaged it to the next lowest order on its scale, the next lowest odd layer, which is 5. So I keep bandaging it down to the next lowest layer. So obviously I can't solve the floppy iCubes the same way that I solved the iCubes. Now what about the 3x3? What can we anticipate that this will be bandaged into? Well, if the 3x4x4 was bandaged down to a 2x2, and the 4x5x5 was bandaged to a 3x3, this bandaged to a 6x6, this bandaged to a 4x4, and this bandaged to a 5x5, then what would a 3x2x2 be bandaged into? Well, the next lowest scale on the odd scale from a 3x3 would be a 1x1. So let's see what that looks like. Now notice with every one of these iCubes, I had a bunch of layers that at least could be scrambled against each other, and then one extended layer. With the 3x3, I don't have any layers that can be scrambled in conjunction with another layer. I move it like this layer doesn't have anything to scramble with, and this layer doesn't have anything to scramble with. So the scramble of this puzzle is not something that I can use cuboid strategy for. I just keep going like this, turn, and as I'm scrambling this, it becomes more and more apparent that what this is being scrambled into is from time to time something that can't move at all. This has no way of moving. This has no way of moving, but this does. 1, 2 layers, but you can see this is an amalgamation of all. And just like every so often with here, although it moves as a 2x2, you might end up freeing up 1 to have an extra layer. That's the same thing here. So what I've bandaged my 3x2x2 into is I've bandaged it into a 3x1x1. I've actually bandaged this into a 1 layer where every so often I can find another layer that can move. So it's a very simple, basic scramble. Much more basic than the others, obviously, because what I'm dealing with is a bandaged 1x1, or a 3x1x1. I've actually taken an entire dimension out, and I'm just going and doing as much of a scramble as I can with this, as I start to find myself bandaged almost to the point of there being no further motions possible except for very limited amounts. And I think I might even be there. Alright, so there you have it. The scrambled versions of these puzzles. And now the question is solve strategy. What's the underlying organizing strategy that I can use to solve these puzzles? Well, I think that this guy here, which is the 4-layer version, the 3x4x4 floppy iCube, is kind of the midpoint of the strategies that can be used. There are 2 strategies that can be used to solve these puzzles, that can be used to solve any bandaged puzzles, actually. One is the Floppy iCube strategy that I'm going to be using mostly, and the other is the AI strategy. The AI strategy is something that came from the 4x4 AI cube, and as you recall, if you saw the tutorial with this, that was the only strategy that I can use. The 4x4 AI solve is the keystone strategy that can be used with any type of incredibly bandaged puzzles that you can't seem to solve in any other way. Anyway, let's take a few moments to just kind of look at this. Kind of a nice looking scrambled mess that all this has turned into.